They say justice sounds like a gavel striking wood. That night, it sounded like General Marris's voice, calm, razor-sharp. "Lock the doors, now!" Winter skimmed the windows with frost while the ballroom pretended it was July. Champagne in constant bloom, a string quartet smoothing every edge. 1930, the Aegis Vantage crest glowed over the dais, all velvet authority. I moved as a shadow with a tray, earpiece tucked beneath dark hair, reading uniforms, cataloging smiles that never reached the eyes. The Willards chandeliers scattered light like confetti over senators, executives, and brass who believed the room belonged to them. My father once told me, "Never mistake silence for loyalty." Those words came back the instant a thin dossier slid from Lieutenant Colonel Darren Cole's hand to General Alden Marris. Cole's fingers were careful. Marris's face was not. I drifted in, refreshing a senator's wine, and saw the title block stamped neat as a verdict, Project Harborlight. Below it, an authorizing flourish I knew the way you know a scar, Colonel Mercer Hale, who'd been folded into a flag 5 winters ago. The ink's shine said today. The grave said impossible. I kept my tray high to hide the tremor, angled the polished edge to catch Morris's eye, then touched my left wrist. 2 crisp taps, the field whisper. Stop. Compromised. He didn't look at me. He looked at the pen waiting in his hand, then the signature that should not exist. His jaw settled. He set the pen down. Sound thinned. Laughter kinked. The quartet missed a step no one would admit hearing. An Aegis Vantage VP leaned toward the dais with an everything's fine smile that already looked tired. Marris requested the packet. Cole surrendered it like a man handing over a live wire. Pages turned with the authority of weather. I took half a step back, still close enough to read the bones of the room. Impatience, calculation, a rising need to keep the party pleasant. Cameras began to hunt. The ceiling glittered. The truth did not. Marris asked who assembled the authorization pages. Titles arrived, never names. Outside, December pressed its face to the glass. Inside, the air smelled of roast and worry. I pictured Hale's widow somewhere quiet, never imagining his hand would be borrowed to move $2 billion. Marris rose. No hurry, no show, just gravity, deciding it had been patient long enough. Military police, lock the doors, no one leaves. The order hit like a dropped anchor. Conversations sheared clean off, forks hung mid-air. MPs crossed the carpet and sealed the exits with ceremonial calm, and the last bar of the quartet's waltz died like a light under a thumb. Flashbulbs flared. Someone protested about donors and schedules. Someone else remembered to be afraid. Marris stood with the dossier in one hand and the room in the other. I kept the tray braced against my ribs, feeling the slow thud of my own pulse in the silver. The chandeliers kept sparkling, defiant, as if brightness could overrule handwriting from a grave. A senator cleared his throat and swallowed it again. Cole stared at the floor. The CEO's smile tried to reboot and failed. As the doors seal shut, I meet Calloway's eyes across the room. He isn't surprised. He already knows. By 8:15 the next morning, I wasn't Agent Keats anymore. Just a file marked, "Suspended pending investigation." Security scanned my badge and the turnstile flashed red. The guard looked down like the floor had something interesting to say. Inside the Navy Yard, the corridors ran cold and clean, every step loud, every face suddenly busy. My office door opened with a manual handle I hadn't used in years. 2 cardboard boxes sat on my chair like a punchline. Last night, the general locked the doors. This morning, my own agency locked me out. Calloway arrived with 2 witnesses and a tone he used for funerals and promotions. "You broke Navy protocol," he said, page edges squared beneath his thumb. "You're relieved of active duty." It wasn't anger. It was tidiness. Down the hall, whispers rippled and then evaporated as I passed. Someone didn't lower their voice in time. She ruined her career. I didn't turn. Reed Halworth from IT lingered in the doorway of cyber, too focused on my screen, still logged off at my desk. When our eyes met, he blinked like I'd interrupted a private thought and vanished. The day stretched until it snapped at 21 Huncuck against the cold marble of the Lincoln Memorial. The tourists had thinned to footprints, and the reflecting pool held a wrinkled Washington monument. Snow dusted the steps. It hissed into nothing on General Morris's coat. We didn't salute. We didn't need to. "I signed early drafts," he said, voice low enough to stay between us and the stone. "That's on me." He slipped a small black drive into my glove. "This is the original Harbor Light package, before anyone touched it." "Why me?" I asked. "Because you saw what I didn't want to." His eyes moved to the darkness under the colonnade, measuring threats. "They will bury you to protect the deal." The words landed heavier than the snow. I didn't ask who "they" were. Bureaucracy is good at plurals. I followed the river of taillights out of the district and into the blue-black quiet of Shenandoah. My father's farmhouse took the cold like an old boxer, head high, paint scarred. The wooden porch creaked hello. Inside, the mantel carried the folded triangle of his flag. I set the drive beside it for a second, just to feel the weight balance out. Laptop offline, camera taped, phone in the freezer like an old joke that isn't funny anymore. The desktop flickered awake to a room of shadows and wood smoke. Files opened without complaint, emails, revisions, routing slips. Repetition is where crimes get lazy, and one name kept surfacing like a stain that wouldn't wash. Greyhaven Logistics. Invoices that looped back to nowhere. Subcontractors with no employees. Approvals signed by people who were out of the country the days they allegedly approved. The wind shouldered the window panes. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a freight train blew a single tired note. I scrolled on, compiling a map no one wanted drawn, and felt the farmhouse wrap itself around me the way a church wraps around a confession. My father's flag held the room steady. The screen blinked, not with data, with a new text floating over the desktop from a number I didn't recognize. No greeting, no emoji, just the math of threat. "Put the drive down, or you'll go down next." I stared at the words long enough to hear my own breathing. The radiator ticked like a metronome for panic. I closed the lid and let the room go dark. Snow made a faint hiss at the window, a whisper through teeth. Outside the farmhouse, a black SUV idles with headlights off. My hand reaches for my sidearm. They found me. Dead men don't sign contracts. Yet Colonel Mercer Hale, buried with full honors 5 years ago, just authorized a $2 billion deal. Dawn crept over the farmhouse like a bruised eyelid. Frost ticked along the window sash while I spread both versions of Harbor Light across the kitchen table. One set read like a clean ledger: living officers, traceable initials, dates that matched travel orders. The other wore a ghost. Mercer Hale's name looped in fresh ink where it had no right to live. I ran my finger along routing codes, compared metadata, watched the cursor hop between columns until the coffee went cold and the edges of the world felt too sharp. Snow still fell when I pulled into a roadside diner outside Quantico. The jukebox had a "Do Not Touch" sign taped over chrome. The cook worked a griddle with the dignity of a priest. Baylor Finch slid into the booth opposite me, hair still marine short, hands scarred in the honest places. He didn't bother with small talk. "You saved my sister's scholarship. I owe you. Tell me what you need." "I need a mirror no one else can see into," I said. "Willard Hotel, service corridors, 2 nights ago." He nodded once. "Eat something. Then we ghost." By afternoon, we were off the grid, an old marine safe house swallowed by pines, concrete floors, and a generator that made conversation choose its words. We kept our coats on. Baylor set up a laptop and a nest of cables, coaxing the world to speak through a line that wasn't supposed to exist. My father would have called it cheating. I called it balance. We tunneled into hotel storage, then security, then the directory where cameras store what people pretend never happened. Some feeds came up on the screen. Banquet hall wide shots, glitter frozen in pixels, waitstaff drifting like commas. Others loaded to a black square with a polite error. Baylor cursed softly. Partial retention. Not an accident. He pivoted to logs. If you can't hide the body, hide the calendar. Fingers staccato over keys, he dug past the interface into the bones. The cursor blinked, then gave us a page no one designed for company. There it was in monochrome austerity, the kind of truth that doesn't need adjectives. User. Picalloway, NCIS ADM. Action. Video deletion. Service hallway. Third floor. 09:13 a.m. Deck 16. My stomach dropped like an elevator with the cable cut. The third floor service hall was the artery behind the ballroom. Trays, doors, the corridor where deals slip by in shoes that don't squeak. Baylor didn't look at me right away. He kept staring at the proof as if distance might make it blink. He finally lifted his head. Rowan, your own director erased the footage. He's framing you. The room found a new temperature. Outside, wind ran its glove across the siding. Inside, the generator hummed like a warning you couldn't quite translate. I thought of Calloway's flat politeness, of the way he never raised his voice because other people did that for him. I thought of Hale's widow, somewhere with a folded flag, and no reason to imagine his name signing checks from the grave. My phone, battery removed, SIM card exiled, still had voicemail when I checked it on an isolated handset Baylor handed me. One message, left an hour earlier, voice careful as a person stepping through glass. Miss Keats, I think you should see what my husband left behind. She didn't say her name. She didn't have to. I saved the number to my memory instead of the device. Baylor began packaging the log, building a chain that wouldn't break even when men with titles tugged on it. We argued timing, take it to Marris tonight or wait for safer daylight, while the sky outside hardened from pewter to black, the lights go out. Oh, the safe house sinks into darkness. A voice crackles through an old field radio outside the door. Agent Keats, step outside, alone, or we come in. They didn't put me in handcuffs. They gave me a seat in front of a mahogany table and 5 stars on uniformed shoulders. Honestly, I preferred the handcuffs. Authority hummed in the Pentagon sublevel C like an air conditioner you couldn't turn off. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, no windows. The room felt poured in a single piece, like concrete that decided to be a chamber. My father's warning threaded the silence. One day, I'd stand alone in a room full of power and choose whether silence was safer than truth. It wasn't a day anymore. It was 09 December 20th. General Marris sat to my left, posture quiet and immovable. To my right, Director Pierce Calloway arranged his papers as if neat corners could discipline facts. Admiral Loretta Vance presided at the center, eyes that weighed, not blinked. A court reporter's steno machine murmured like an insect trapped behind glass. Marris began without theatrics. We are here because protocol was followed flawlessly by people without conscience. The sentence fell flat and heavy, exactly the way a true thing should. He nodded to me. My hands didn't shake when I slid a folder forward. 2 versions of Harbor Light lay open. One clean, one corrupted. I walked the board through each page, routing numbers, approval chains, metadata, the penmanship that didn't belong. I kept my voice level, describing the impossible signature the way you describe weather on a ship's log. Clear, cold, wind from the west, a dead colonel signing from the grave. Calloway's face never changed. The fluorescent lights humored him with a halo. Baylor Finch was sworn and took the witness chair like it owed him a debt. He spoke in the unglamorous language of systems, hashes, access paths, audit trails. The screen behind us displayed a grayscale log no spin doctor could pretty up. User, Picalloway NCIS ADM. Action, video deletion, service hallway. Third floor, 0913 a.m., Dex 16. Baylor didn't look at me. He looked at the board. These are administrator-level credentials. Deletion occurred from within a secure NCIS network segment. The room cooled another degree. Calloway's lawyerly mouth shaped the word coincidence but didn't deploy it. The double doors opened. Heels crossed the threshold with the courage of someone who has already lived through the worst. Evelyn Hale carried a sealed evidence box like an urn. She stood at the table and, with the board's permission, broke the seal. Inside, Mercer Hale's original signature card, preserved by time and grief, and a folded sheet of his handwriting. Admiral Vance put on her glasses. "Read it," she said. Evelyn's voice barely touched the air. "If my name appears after my death, someone is lying." She placed the note beside the forged authorization, like a mirror and a mask on the same face. Silence made room for the sentence to land everywhere at once. Calloway rose. The chair legs shouted against the tile. "This is a sham! She is a rogue agent!" The last words snapped at me like a leash. Vance's pen struck the table, a small crack loud as a gunshot in that room. "Director Pierce Calloway, based on the evidence presented, you are relieved of duty, effective immediately." For the first time, something in Calloway's poise misfired. He glanced at the log still chilling on the screen, at the signature card that didn't love him back, at Marris, who refused to be decorative today. Marris turned to the board, voice low. "I signed early drafts in trust. That was my failure. Agent Keats stopped it from becoming my shame." He didn't look at me when he said it. That made it truer. Military police entered, not in a rush, but in a certainty. Calloway gathered his papers as if paper could become armor. He leaned across the space the MPs allowed and spoke under the hum of lights, the way men speak on the edge of a cliff and pretend they aren't looking down. "You think this is over? The system eats people like you." "Maybe, but not today." They didn't return my badge. They handed me a question instead. "If you could go back, would you still break protocol?" My answer was simple. Yes. Because if honor comes after orders, it isn't honor anymore. Capitol Hill smelled like old carpet and new cameras. Flashes stitched a staccato curtain as I took my seat before the Senate Intelligence Committee. They studied me the way surgeons study scans, hunting for failure, proof of anomaly. A staffer poured water I didn't drink. Someone coughed. Microphones clicked alive. The chair's voice was measured, designed for transcripts. "You broke Navy protocol. Was it worth it?" My palms stayed open on the table. Protocol told me to stay silent. My conscience told me to speak. I chose the one I could live with. Pens stopped briefly. The room inhaled. The chair nodded once, not theatrically, simply. Let the record reflect. Truth was spoken here today. Afterward, Winter held the Chesapeake in a quiet fist. I found General Marris at the docks just before sunrise, breath fogging, gulls stitching gray sky to gray water. He pressed a small, scuffed insignia into my hand, the kind of metal that remembers hands. "I signed the wrong papers once. You stopped me from signing away my soul." The horizon took a thin line of light. He watched it arrive like a man counting blessings he never expected. "You carry the line now, Keats. Don't let them turn you into another rulebook." No salute, just a nod that felt like a door opening. He walked the pier until fog took him in. A week later, the classroom smelled of dry erase ink and nervous hope. 20 recruits, creased uniforms, bright eyes, the hum of futures about to happen. I uncapped a marker and wrote 3 words tall enough to reach the back row. Honor before protocol. A hand rose, knuckles pale with effort. "Ma'am, is that official NCIS doctrine?" I couldn't help it, I smiled. "Not yet, but it should be." Laughter edged the tension back a step. I told them what the job does to your sleep and what truth does to your spine and how both are survivable if you choose the right one when no one is applauding. One by one, they stood. Not for rank, most had none to spare, but for the idea printed on the board. The salute moved down the rows like a tide. I felt something in my chest unclench, a knot I'd been carrying since a ballroom glittered over a lie. On the drive home, the roads were wet with the melt. I took the last turn by muscle memory and let the farmhouse appear the way it always does, gradually, like a promise kept. Inside, I set my father's folded flag beside the flash drive and listened to the house settle around us. We didn't win everything, but we didn't stay silent. Outside, the wind is quiet. For the first time since that night under chandeliers, I am not afraid. If my story left something burning in your chest, don't let it fade. Leave a comment, tell me what moment shook you the most, or what you would have done in my place. I stood up not because I wasn't afraid, but because someone had to. If you believe honor should come before protocol, let your voice be heard. Share this story, stand with me, and let others know that silence is not loyalty, and courage doesn't always wear a uniform.